Hi, my name's Kingsley from Icicle Mountaineering, and today this video is talking about the risks of Mont Blanc and how we as a company try and protect you and our guides before going to the mountain. And it's to give you an insight into the thought processes, the risk matrices that we follow and what we're looking out for. So on the mountain there are 8 key causes of risk in the Gouter Couloir. The first risk that we're looking at is permafrost, where the ground is frozen together by either water that's permeated into the moraines from the sort of snow above and is gluing any loose rocks together. So things we're looking out for here are high ambient temperatures, heat waves, and if either of those are present, so high freezing levels or successive heat waves potentially hitting the Alps, we're looking for a gradual but evident destabilisation of the couloir. Number 2 is thermal gradients. During the day, the heat naturally builds up as the sun hits the couloir, and then as the sun leaves and it goes back into the shade, it gets cooler again. So the timings are quite critical. We want to get groups across the couloir while it's still in the shade and the sun isn't heating the couloir and causing that sudden temperature spike or thermal shock to release rocks. Number 3 is the presence of water in the couloir. There are 3 sources of this. One is meltwater from snow that is gradually melting from the spring or winter snows that have happened on the mountain. Number 2 is altitude rain, high altitude. So the top of the Gouter Couloir is 3,900 metres, and occasionally when the freezing level is very high, any precipitation that falls can fall as rain rather than as snow at that altitude. And the third thing we're looking for is storms, and especially adiabatic or convection storms. So these effectively thermal breezes that build up, towering cumulus clouds that can quickly develop into a late afternoon storm, can suddenly and unexpectedly, even though there's no frontal weather system associated, put rain high on the mountain. Number 4 is humans, other climbers on the mountain, people higher than you who potentially are knocking loose rocks down and can cause a risk to you. So there are 2 ways of combating this. One is to go on quieter days, if they ever exist, and secondly is to make sure that a group is sufficiently fit and trained to be able to keep a good pace and keep ahead of people who potentially are a little bit slower and potentially might be less good on their feet and knocking rocks down. Number 5 is the wind. High wind above 60 kilometres an hour can dislodge loose rocks. So especially once you've checked out the forecasts and the mountain weather forecasts rather than a valley-based forecast, keep an eye out on the wind speed. And if it reaches a certain sort of critical level, in our experience this seems to be about 60 kilometres an hour, don't go. Number 6 is again the human factors again. It's going back to the climbers and ourselves wanting to climb on the mountain. Have we got the prerequisite experience? If this can't be demonstrated, we need to really question if it's safe to go on the mountain regarding the risks of the safety matrix. If there is any particular rockfall, has that person got the skills to be able to speed up and get quickly out of danger on the mountain, or are they less good on their feet and they're going to be exposed to that danger for a greater length of time? Number 7 is the exposure to risk. Have a look at the weather forecasts. If it's looking good for the next day, then I think you have a justified attempt or reason to cross the couloir. If the weather's looking like it's not going to permit a safe summit attempt, why would you go across the couloir and expose yourself to those risks both on the ascent and on the descent? Increasingly, I think we need to be a little bit more wise to this, and if it's not a case of if you don't go, you don't know, it's more a case of saying the weather's not looking stable enough, I won't go and expose myself to those risks. Number 8 is storms. Electric storms, lightning storms. You can use various kind of apps for this, be it Météo France and looking at the radar models there, or the My Lightning Tracker app, and we're looking for any lightning strikes and associated thunder that's occurred within the last 12 hours or seems to be predicted in the future. Whenever that's happening, we're worried about if the sort of lightning has actually shattered rocks and they're going to potentially come loose. We're also looking at the associated rainfall that might be associated with those storm cells. So what's the actual warning signs and some tips that I can give you to keep safer? The first is meltwater. Have a look at the Tête Rousse webcam looking up into the Gouter Couloir and look for any signs of meltwater, so a dark streak coming down the middle of the couloir. It's very indicative of if there's been either rain up high or there's been increased snow melt, and the water that's present in the couloir can lubricate rocks and cause them to fall. Also in dry periods, look for a very light coloured grey dust that's indicative in the middle of the couloir that shows where rocks have exploded as they've been falling down the couloir. So either the dark stain of the meltwater or the light grey of rockfall dust. Both are warning signs. The second top tip is to look for the 0 degree isotherm, or the freezing level. If you were to go on a free app such as Météo Bleu and look for the Aiguille de Midi at 3,842 metres, it's a very similar altitude to the Gouter hut. And if you're finding that the freezing level in the day or overnight, where there actually is no refreeze at all, you have a good warning that there's a high risk of meltwater. And so the sort of advice that we tend to keep by is if there's no refreeze at all at that altitude, either in the daytime or in the night, it's not safe to go. Number 3 is very simple. What are the locals doing? What is local precedent? If the Compagnie de Guide of Chamonix or Saint-Gervais aren't going and they've renounced all their ascents, it's a good question of why you might want to go when the local expertise is saying that they don't want to go. It's also another fact to kind of consider, that is, if your insurance is actually valid, or professional insurance of the guides is valid, if local precedent isn't being followed. So if ever there's a clue there, that's the top one. Clue number 4 is to see if there's an actual ban, or if the huts have been closed, or it's suggested by the mayor's office of Saint-Gervais, the commune that Mont Blanc sits in, if it's unsafe to go and if you should change your plans. This has happened very rarely where the Gouter hut's actually been closed by the mayor, but it's easy to check on the FFCAM website. Number 5, the hut spaces. You're probably all aware how difficult it is to get space in the huts on Mont Blanc. They're booked many months in advance. So if you were to look on the website or to call the hut and you find that there's a lot of space in the hut, it's a big warning bell, a big alarm bell and red flag. Why is there space there when normally it would be full to capacity every single night? And tip number 6 is the visibility. If you've identified that there is a higher rockfall risk, or you're unsure about it, rather potentially starting in the Tête Rousse hut, the low hut, where you might be starting your ascent in the night and not be able to see any rocks falling, potentially consider starting from the Gouter hut, the higher hut, so that you're crossing the couloir early in the morning but within the daylight, so that you can see any rocks that potentially are falling. When it's at night time, you've just got the sense of hearing, you haven't got the sight as well. So it's an easy one to adapt and change. And then the guides are looking for various human factors, as is everyone else. Having a look at the equipment and the clothing that people turn up in. Have they got brand new boots? Have they got clothing that is, again, shiny new and untested? It gives a little bit of insight into the experience of the group and if there are any kind of concerns there. We're also looking for red flags such as summit fever. Are people asking to ignore risk to try and push higher on the mountain, and a sort of blinkered approach rather than a learning and safety approach? And it's those red flags that are key. For further information on the risks in the couloir, have a look at the links in the descriptions below from the Petzl Foundation report and also that from the UIAA. It gives you a little bit of an insight. I hope this video has been useful. It's just to try and give a brief, very brief insight into some of the warning signs that we're looking for and how we try and adapt as a company to keep all our guests safe, and what the key risks are. Most of the people who have accidents on the Gouter Couloir, or that sort of area of the mountain, is actually due to people slipping and people falling. So those going with guides, the guide is there to look after someone's safety, so it's a lot less of a concern. But all these little factors that we've discussed today, the freezing levels, the rockfall, where potentially rain's getting into the couloir, if snow and fresh snowfall is actually a benefit or a hindrance because it's suddenly going to melt because it's gone into contact with rock that potentially is hot. There's a myriad of factors that we're looking at every single day, every single week to try and keep our group safe. So I hope it gives you a little insight into what we're looking at. It's obviously not a perfect science, but it's a whole multi-layered approach to look at all these factors and clues that can help keep you safe.